Good evening. It is 6 o'clock. We'll call our meeting to order. Could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Mayor Lands. Mayor Lands?
Here.
Vice Mayor Wolter?
Here.
Councilmember Bagby? Is just, thank you. Councilmember Cruz? Here. And Councilmember Paula?
Here.
Let the record reflect that all council members are present.
Thank you. Any conflict of interest declarations?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just note that I'll have to recuse myself under item G1 when Zone 3 is discussed. I live in the Cottage subdivision.
I think Zone 3 isn't that the Vineyard, isn't that ours, the new park area? Let's just double check that. Or maybe, David, you can clarify so we know that we're all doing our declarations correctly. Let's see, I could have swore it was the other way. I did last year for sure. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it the correct way. Zone 3 says Jefferson Springs.
Zone 1 should be Jefferson Springs.
Right.
Zone 1 is Jefferson Springs.
Right. Mr. Mayor, I'll be recusing myself from Jefferson Springs.
Okay.
So we got to
Let's make sure. I'm on Zone 3 right here.
So you're
not
Zone
giving me
2.
anything good here.
Who is?
I think you.
No, I'm Zone 1. Jefferson Springs.
Okay.
Zone 2. So I'm going through all of the resolutions to make sure we're correct. Anyone else's the same? They're all the same? So David, you're going to have to clarify for us if you don't mind. The zones. I don't have a zoning map on mine either.
Zone 3 is cottages, and Zone 2 is Vineyard Meadows,
Okay, thank you.
And Zone 1 is Jefferson.
and Zone 1 Jefferson. Zone 4 the Vineyards, Zone 5.
Okay, so you're Gus, and this is
Iowa Ranch,
Paula.
Zone 6 Brookside Terrace, Zone
Are you
7
on that way?
Highland Terrace.
Okay, so Councilmember Paula, you will be from Zone 3.
Zone 3, yes.
Vice Mayor, you're from Zone 1.
Correct.
Myself, I'll be from Zone 2. And Councilmember Bagby and Cruz, I think, are exempt from that. Great.
Mayor, if I can, just to clarify in the record, that with regard to the landscape and lighting district assessment under G1, under new business in the agenda, Vice Mayor Walter will recuse himself on the first resolution regarding Jefferson Springs. Mayor will recuse himself, Mayor Lands will recuse himself on the resolution for Zone 2, Vintage Meadows. And Councilmember Paula will recuse himself on the third resolution for the cottages.
Correct. Thank you, sir. Any other? I don't think there are any other this morning.
No other conflicts of
Okay.
interest.
B, public comments. Any person wishing to speak on the city council on items not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Members of the public may have the right to speak on any item on the council agenda at the time the item comes up for consideration. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the city council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda. Per city council policy, 3 minutes are allotted to each speaker, and each speaker may only speak once per item. Any public comment from the audience first?
Thank you, Mayor Lands. Yes, we have one member of the public raising their hand online. It's Nina Hadgett from the Chamber
Go
of
ahead and promote
Commerce.
them if you can.
And Nina, I've given you permission to speak if you'll have.
The tardy unmute. So basically, I just wanted to take a couple minutes and share some really good news. 8 local businesses were nominated to be from Cloverdale as Best of Sonoma County for the Press Democrats Readers Poll. And I just wanted to quickly name them. The first is Aaron Mavis Clothing, Dahlia and Sage for Best Grocer. Best Insurance Agent would be Erica Bishop, and I believe she was a winner last year. IC Optical, Best Eyeglass Shop. Best Farm to Table Restaurant, Trading Post Restaurant. Best Assisted Living, The Villas. Best Dance Studio, Ashlyn McLean at Encore Dance Theater. And then the Clover Dog for Pet Store. So that's the most we've ever had. And I'm super excited about it. And I know that you can't take any action on what I'm saying, but if you could I would love you to vote for them, go online, vote early, vote often. But they're all it's great. We are on the map. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Nina. I appreciate your time. Any other hands?
Mayor Lanza, no other hands raised at this time.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no others, we'll move on. C1, Student Liaison Reports. Guadalupe.
Thank you, Mayor Lanz. Yesterday, boys baseball won against Willits with the score being 8-0. Softball also won, their score being 18-12, and girls softball has a tournament championship game this Friday on Daly Field against Fortuna. Cheer tryouts for the 2022 to 2023 school year have been taking place this week after school, and they will continue to have them until the 13th. For track, there are 10 athletes which will be attending the North Coast section, which is this Saturday. Great job, Eagles. Today, AP Spanish students took their AP test, and other AP classes have been doing the same this past week, and in the upcoming week as well, as the school year approaches an end. Last Friday, we had Eagle Day, which was a minimum day in which students were put into different groups and went to different classes to learn all about the qualities that Cloverdale High School hopes their graduates to have, which is known as Portrait of a Graduate. These qualities include curiosity, initiative, communication, empathy, and collaboration. This Saturday is Cloverdale High School prom. It's been a long time in the works and has really come together. A big thank you to the community for their support and generosity with our prom and making it happen. Lastly, for clubs, tomorrow during lunch in room 26, students that are interested in an academic decathlon will meet and see if they're interested in participating. FFA students who are running for officer positions are picking up applications from Ms. Fernandez's room, and this is all for the upcoming school year as well. And lastly, Interact has begun a new project where they will be making blankets for the elderly and the homeless. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? Great. Moving on. C2, Proclamations, Older Americans Month. David, who do we have here?
Mayor, I'm happy to read the proclamation unless you'd like to turn it over to one of your colleagues or Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor, are you interested?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone? Go ahead.
Mayor, members of council, tonight is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale declaring May 2022 Older Americans Month in Cloverdale. Whereas the City of Cloverdale is home to older Americans who enrich and strengthen our community. Whereas Cloverdale includes a growing number of older Americans who have built resilience and strength over their lives through successes and difficulties. And whereas Cloverdale benefits when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds are included and encouraged to share their successes and stories of resilience. And whereas Cloverdale recognizes our need to nurture ourselves, reinforce our strength, and continue to thrive in times of both joy and difficulty. And whereas Cloverdale can foster communities of strength by creating opportunities to share stories and learn from each other, engaging older adults through education, recreation, and service, and encouraging people of all ages to celebrate connections and resilience. And whereas the City of Cloverdale is proud to honor the history and contributions of older Americans in our community of Cloverdale throughout our state and nation, and whereas the month of May 2022 presents an opportunity to acknowledge and thank older adults and those who support them, like the Cloverdale Senior Center, for their significant contributions to our community. Now therefore be proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Cloverdale does hereby declare May 2022 as Older Americans Month in Cloverdale, and urges all residents to recognize older adults and the people who support them as essential contributors to the strength of our community. So ordered, Todd Lands, Mayor.
Thank you, David. Well read. We have in our audience Melanie Hall from the Senior Center to accept this proclamation. Absolutely. Absolutely. Gus, would you like to take the photo with them? Since you work so much with them.
You go right ahead, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That's for old people.
Anyone else? Martha or Joe, you want in? Anybody?
I'm good, thank you.
We just want to say thank you to the council for acknowledging the importance of our seniors in our community and how they enrich our community and serve our community and are a very important part of what makes this community special. So thank you.
I also wanted to thank the council. The current status of the Senior Center is striving towards relativity and sustainability, and without you as partners, we wouldn't be able to make it. We're looking at the whole city, and we really appreciate every bit of focus that you give us. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. I just want to thank you for everything that you do for the residents in our city. I know it's not limited to just seniors, though you do play a big part in a lot of great activities. And I just want you to know how much the people of this community, as well as this council, appreciates everything you do. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, please, Melanie, just kind of a ditto on Councilmember Paula. I just want to thank you for the hard work that you do at the Senior Center and Full Service Center. But I can't wait until I'm old enough to be a member. And then I'll be there. So, but thank you in the meantime. And Al, thank you for jumping in and serving on the board as well. Thank you.
Yes, I want to say thank you to Melanie and Al for all that you have done for the community and for your outreach to the Latinx community. We have worked very hard, and especially during the pandemic. And I really thank you for the support and the collaboration that we were able to engage in to make sure that all goals and all people, all goals were met and all people were served. Thank you again.
Councilmember Bagby.
Thank you, Mayor Lands. I just also want to thank the Senior Center for all they do for our community. And because I am calling from Sacramento, I would be remiss if I didn't call attention to the California Master Plan for Aging and acknowledge the Senior Center's pivotal role that they play in our city and our community. The Master Plan was brought about because California's over 60 population is going to be the most diverse and it's also the fastest growing of any age group. By 2030, it's projected that nearly 11 million Californians are going to be what we call older adults, and that equals about a quarter of the state's population. And I think that the concentration is even higher in Cloverdale, and that just underscores the senior center's pivotal role in our community, in helping make sure that our senior population is represented, that they're served. And I, for one, just appreciate the senior center staff and board for being such a great partner with the council. I'm really glad we're honoring that population today, and look forward to working with the center in the future. And thank you for accepting the proclamation.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I would like to just echo what everyone is saying. Thank you guys for everything you do. I think in 2020, we were at 58% 55 and over in Cloverdale, which is a pretty high number. And you're an integral part in everything we do here in our community, and you definitely make us successful. So thank you. Next, C3, Police Week and Peace Officer Memorial Day Proclamation. Chief, would you like to read it?
I'd be happy to read it, Mayor. Thank you. City of Cloverdale, City Council Proclamation, Police Week, and Peace Officer Memorial Day. Whereas law enforcement officers play an essential role in ensuring our safety and in safeguarding our rights and freedoms. And whereas our officers partner with citizens to keep their community as safe as possible by enforcing traffic laws, proactive policing, and forming neighborhood watch groups. And whereas when an unsafe situation does arise, officers are the first to respond and provide assistance, often at great risk to their own personal safety. And whereas Cloverdale police officers continue to face increased danger, both seen and unseen, and scrutiny in the performance of their official duties. And whereas our officers recognize their duty to serve our citizens by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas City of Cloverdale police officers responded to calls for service, provided needed security, and participate in numerous community events. And whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have established May 15th, 2022 as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which it falls as National Police Week. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Todd Lands of the City of Cloverdale, proclaims May 15th, 2022 as Peace Officer Memorial Day, and the week of May 11th through May 16th as Police Week in the City of Cloverdale, and urges all citizens to mark this occasion with appropriate ceremonies commemorating police officers past and present who by their faithful and loyal devotion have collectively preserved our rights and our security, and further extend our appreciation to our Chief of Police, Jason Ferguson, and his staff, Police Lieutenant Chris Parker, Police Sergeant Sal Baruso, Rudy Segabiano, Police Officers Kevin Burt, John Camara, Damian Eaglesfield, Bo Gastineau, Jason Mora, Carlos Nunez, Ricky Rhodes, Jim Stratton, and Katie Vanoni. Presented this day, May 11th, 2022, Todd Lands, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to just take a moment and thank our staff personally, of course, for their continued dedication and commitment to the department and the community. I'm confident in saying that not everyone probably realizes just how increasingly difficult this profession has become. The growing demands placed on our officers by legislative changes and community concerns have really brought a complex new set of challenges. But I am thankful that they continue to stay devoted to the mission of providing the highest level of public safety. It's important to note, too, also that this group collectively handled 12,646 incidents within this past year from May 1st to current. They took 792 police reports. They made 283 arrests, and they wrote 658 citations, 347 of those for traffic, 89 of those for parking. And additionally, I want to add that they are also tasked with a lot of extra shift patrol duties, as well as a lot of extra patrol requests that community routinely asks for. And those include extra patrols at the city park, Ferber Parks, both at the bathrooms, at the dugouts, at the River Park Trail, often they're asked to do that. Washington School, Cloverdale High School. They continue to do foot patrols in the plaza, dealing with the homeless situation. And they receive numerous speeding violations throughout our complaints throughout our neighborhoods, as well as general smoking complaints that come out often. So needless to say, there are a lot on their plate, and I'm really proud of all of them. And I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Chief. Council?
Yes, Chief. We thank you particularly for your leadership, because you have made sure that you have a team that is constantly growing and developing, especially because of the demands that have come upon the profession. Thank you for being so responsive to all of us in council and to the community at large. It is so important to have a person like you in this position of leadership that is able to communicate well and clearly with all. Thank you.
Councilmember Bagby?
Mr. Mayor, I want to take the chance to thank the chief and all of your officers, and including the dispatchers and the support staff that just make everything run. I mean, you guys protect our community on a daily basis. You're so responsive to community concerns. And I just really want to thank you for your participation and support for local events, including recent Citrus Fair and the Earthquake and Preparedness Expo. The presence was great and so appreciated by everybody. And your service and your support is just it's just so appreciated. I'm glad we're taking this opportunity to give you our heartfelt thanks. I hope we express our gratitude, but any excuse to hear the names of our officers and to call out our community support, it's a great one. So just thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ditto everything that's said. I don't want to repeat it, but I do want to say thank you. You've underestimated when you said challenges, that things have changed considerably, and they continue to evolve as we move forward. So I know you have your hands full, but we have a good team, and under your leadership, it's really, it shows, and everything's going very well. And I do want to thank you personally for always making your time available when there's a complaint or a citizen concern. A couple of times I've reached out, you're always making time to meet, and we come to a consensus on how to resolve it and move forward in a positive way. So thank you. And again, please extend our appreciation to the full department.
Chief, just to kind of ditto what everyone is saying, but please, pass along the City Council's big thank you for the job that our officers do, and thank you for your leadership. So, thank you.
Along with the changes that we talk about, or you talk about, that we've seen over the past couple decades, it's a small town. One of the hardest places to work as a police officer is in a small town, because you're either loved or hated, and it all depends on who you pull over or who you contact. So to see a lot of them living in our town and still being able to do their job and do it at a very high level, it shows how professional they are and how good of an officer and communicator they are. Because if you can convince somebody that they earned what they give them when you give them a ticket, you've done your job right. So thank you for everything you guys do. I love watching it progress, and I can't wait to support you more in the future. Okay, D, no hands, just checking. D, consent calendar. All items under consent calendar will be considered together by one action of the City Council unless any council member or member of the public requests an item be removed and considered separately. Anyone want to pull any items? Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Bagby. Yes, ma'am.
Request of the clerk that he correct the spelling of my name in the minutes. Just a comment.
Okay. We copied that. And anything else pulled? Councilmember Bagby? Okay. Great, seeing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar with that one amendment made to the minutes.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lands. Councilmember Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz? Councilmember Bagby? Vice Mayor Wolter?
Aye.
Mayor Lance?
Aye.
Thank you. E-communications, anything, David?
Mayor, no communications.
No public hearings, so we will move forward to G1. Preliminarily approve the engineer's report for fiscal year 22-23 for the City of Cloverdale Landscaping and Lighting Assessment District and set the time and date of the public hearing zone for zones 1 to 7.
And Mayor, if I can, I just would like to request the clerk at this time to promote Mr. Paul Wade, as well as our Park Superintendent Hector Galvan. And while the clerk is working on promoting them as panelists to Zoom, go ahead and just introduce this item tonight. This is part of our annual process for our landscape and lighting assessment districts. What's included in your packet is an engineer's report for fiscal year 22-23 for the City of Cloverdale's Landscape and Lighting Assessment District. There's one district with 7 zones. Zone 1 is Jefferson Springs. Zone 2 is Vintage Meadows. Zone 3 is the cottages. Zone 4 is the vineyards. Zone 5, Iole Ranch. Zone 6, Brookside Terrace. Zone 7, Sunrise Hill. So for each of these particular zones, our finance team, along with our park superintendent, have developed specific and independent budgets for each one of those zones. And so included in the engineering report is a detailed budget for each of those zones. And as part of that process, that helps to establish the assessments that are proposed as part of the engineer's report for each fiscal year. And what Mr. Paul Wade is going to do, Coastland Civil Engineering is the engineering record that was appointed by the City Council for this item, is going to walk us through the individual zones within the Landscape and Lighting Assessment District, talk a little bit about the assessments, and it's obviously an opportunity for the public to weigh in. And at the end of the discussion, the request by staff is to adopt the resolutions that are included in your packet. And that would be appropriate at this time as you talk about those resolutions for each of the council members who declared a conflict of interest to go ahead and step away from the dais. So with that said, I'll go ahead and, Paul, if I can turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Paul Wade. I'm with Coastland Civil Engineering, and I've been making this report annually for a while. The City of Cloverdale's Landscape and Lighting Assessment District was initially formed in 1997 with the Jefferson Springs development. Other subdivisions have been annexed over time, and there's now 7 zones. The last one that was annexed was Sunrise Hills in 2005. So there hasn't been any changes to the zones for quite a while. In accordance with the Landscape and Lighting Act of 1972, the city must undertake certain annual proceedings each year in order to levy assessments in the upcoming fiscal year. These proceedings typically require 3 council meetings. On January 26th of this year, the City Council initiated the proceedings by appointing Coastland as the engineer of work to prepare the annual engineer's report. At the second meeting, that's tonight, the council typically adopts resolutions of intent to levy and collect assessments and sets the date for the public hearing. At the third meeting, the council conducts the public hearing and then adopts resolutions authorizing the levying of the assessments for the upcoming fiscal year. The public hearing is proposed to be June 22nd this year. As the city manager said, copy of the preliminary engineer's report is attached to the staff report, and it includes line item budgets for each zone and includes last year's budgets for comparison. I can now share the screen. Can you see the exhibit?
Yes, we can.
Paul, if you could put that in presentation mode, that might help us a little bit.
Sorry?
If you could put that in presentation mode.
No.
Or just hit the plus on the top, plus inside the
Yeah, I can do that.
magnifying glass. There you go. Right there.
Oh, too far. All right. So first of all, this is color coded. It shows the ones that are in light yellow are proposed decreases in the assessments. The ones that are not shaded are proposed to remain the same. And the ones in blue are proposed to have increases in the assessments. The first column shows, it says current years, but the upcoming fiscal year's budget, the percentage change from last year. And all of them are proposed to have increases in their budgets ranging from approximately 1% to 19%. Overall, the total budget is increasing about 7% over last year's. The current estimates for the current year-end fiscal beginning reserves for all 7 zones are higher than was anticipated and projected in last year's report. And that's good news because that means there's additional reserves available to either reduce or not increase the assessments. So decreases in the assessments are proposed for zones 1 and 3. Assessment amounts for zones 2, 4, and 7 are proposed to remain unchanged, and the assessment amount for zones 5 and 6 are proposed to increase. The assessment for zone 6 is proposed to increase to the maximum amount allowed without balloting homeowners as required under Prop 218. You can see the amounts of the changes for each one. So I'm not going to go over the individual budgets unless you have specific questions on them. In 2011, the City Council established a policy of a target minimum reserve fund balance of 25% of the operating expenses or the budget for each zone. The last 3 columns of this spreadsheet show the anticipated beginning reserve balance, that's the estimate there, projected ending reserve balance, and the ending reserve balance as a percentage of the budgets. So all of the zones except zone 6, which is projected to have 0, are projected to have ending reserves at or near the 25% target minimum. So what happens each year is we're projecting this ending year. This is the projected ending year of the upcoming fiscal year reserves. That's based on an estimate of what the reserves will end this year that's made several months in advance, and the budgets. And so frequently what happens is when we get to the end of the fiscal year, the actual reserves are different, either higher or lower than we projected 14 months in advance. So the reason I bring this up is that this projected reserve balance for zone 4 at 22%, you might say, well, that's not near 25%. Based on my experience, I would leave that alone and wait and see what happens. The difference between this actual projected ending reserve and the 25% is $352. So we could increase the assessments to the 29 ESDs in that zone by $12, but I recommend just living with the 22% and see where we're at a year from now. Zones 2 and 6, moving on, have general fund contributions. And in zone 2, Finished Meadows, that is to pay for the general benefit proportion of the Finished Meadows costs of the park that is conferred upon the community at large. I can go into that further if you like, and it's also discussed in Part D of the report. For zone 6, a general fund contribution is necessary just to balance the budget. That's been the case for the last several years and will probably continue to be the case unless we can increase the assessments. It just struggles with only 14 homes being assessed to cover the costs. Each of the zones has a built-in inflation adjustment to the maximum allowed assessment based on the consumer price index that was built in when each zone was was annexed. And this year, the consumer price index adjustment is 4.2%. So the adjustments to the maximum amount of assessments shown without balloting are shown at the bottom of each budget sheet in the report. And there are 4 resolutions before you to account for potential conflicts of interest, as has already been discussed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So my first question is to you, Jose. For those of us who have to recuse in certain zones, what about our general questions? Do you want them all asked now, or do you want them asked individually on each?
What makes sense, Mayor, to avoid any type of questions that any type of discussions on specific zones? We could definitely take every item, and I know we've done this before, where potentially we could take the resolution, discuss that specific zone. If there's any questions, open it up to the public, bring it back, vote, and then we can go through that, and I'm sure we'll capture. If there are any general questions of methodology or whatever, or the process, that could be asked upfront. But it's up to you. I know we'll get through all the questions for sure.
Well, just so that I don't have to repeat the same question for 3 zones. 3, I'll ask it. If it's wrong, you can stop me and say, don't go down that rabbit hole. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, let's start with Councilmember Paul. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor, just in theory, Paul, and thank you for coming up to Cloverdale for the senior every year. Although it's been, your presence has been missing for the last couple of years. But just in theory, we have some pretty significant decreases this year. And I'm just wondering how that happened in those particular subdivisions. Was it a miscalculation that we did, or why was there such a, why is it going to be such a reduction?
So, 2 things. One, would be a minor item, is that the projections for the end of last fiscal year could have been different when you actually got to the end of the fiscal year, because finance department is projecting those in numbers in March. But most likely, it's that the budgets weren't spent. So I mean, that's a good thing. You're making estimates and then being prudent with the expenditures. But we also, there was larger budgets last year. We increased the assessments, and then the money wasn't spent. So that's the best answer I can give.
So, and then just kind of following up on that for 1 second, when we have a significant decrease like we're given this year to a couple subdivisions, is it possible not to lower the amount, but instead almost do like a capital improvement project for that specific zone? Maybe something that we've been looking to do for a while. Or are we obligated to only hold a certain amount?
You could have, that could have been built into the budgets this year. I know there are some specific improvements and repairs that are built into, but that could have done more, could have done a larger capital project, and that would have been totally legitimate use of those assessments. The other thing you can do, I mean, we're kind of using the policy of the 25% was a target minimum that we're trying not to get below, but we don't have a target maximum. So without that, I'm looking at this and saying, well, why would we continue to assess people more money than we need? But if you had a range, say I don't want it to go below 25% or over 50%, then we'd be able to roll over more of the funds and possibly do a capital project in the following year.
Thank you, Paul.
Councilmember Cruz? No questions? Councilmember Bagby, any questions? Okay, the question I have is, all zones, I don't see anything for large equipment, rentals, or anything along those lines. How is that included, or how is that a line item that I'm not seeing? Where would you include that kind of?
Other than just vehicle maintenance, I see or
repair usually listed.
Is that something about renting? Because I see our stuff out there, and other people's, from other companies. I want to know how that's incorporated into
this. Because along with Vice Mayor, seeing decreases, it makes me nervous when we're doing this stuff, that the money is not being allocated correctly.
Mayor, if I can address your question, and I want to make sure Hector is he in, Mike, as a panelist? Hector Galvan. So kind of a couple questions I think you asked in your question. One, with respect to, let's see, mowing services, for example, the cost of that is going to be included in miscellaneous contract services. So for those services that we contract out, that's generally where we're going to cover that expense. And so you'll see their equipment covered there. With respect to city equipment, you're going to find that in usually under supplies. We generally, unless there's a very specific piece of equipment needed for one particular zone, the cost of any equipment is going to be allocated across all of the zones. So, for instance, if we needed a particular let's say backhoe, for example, that was specific to the landscape and lighting district that we needed in multiple zones, that cost would be allocated across all of those zones. So you typically wouldn't see like one piece of equipment, the cost of that, the purchase of that equipment in one zone. It would be allocated across those zones, and we're also very careful if that equipment is going to be used in other areas that are not outside of the district to allocate that cost to, whether it be the general fund or a water enterprise or sewer enterprise, for example. So I think that's what you see is a very careful cost allocation of equipment, and this is something we're working on to be better at, to really make sure we are billing specific expenses to the specific funds for which are using the equipment. So it's we're trying to be much better at direct cost allocation of expenses for equipment to the respective fund on which those costs were incurred.
Yeah, and just because I mean, even under the small tools, it was such a low number, and I know what this stuff costs. It looks like everything your employee costs, it's great, but then you see that, and I'm like, some of them are in the $50 range, and I'm like, you can't even buy a rake for $50, and it's going to last a year. So I just want to clarify. So I appreciate that.
Right.
Okay, let's get to our regulars if there's nothing else. All right, Zone 1. Should we step up the resolution for Zone 1 first?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to recuse myself from this item, if you would, please.
Thank you.
It's going to open it up to every single one.
Let the record reflect, Vice Mayor is recusing himself from Zone 1. Do you have a motion?
No. And Mayor, I would recommend any questions specific to Zone 1, and then open it up to the public, bringing it back, and then taking your motion.
Absolutely. So we'll start with the council. Any questions for Zone 1? None. Specific? Councilmember Bagby, where'd she go? There she is. Councilmember Bagby, do you have any questions for Zone 1 specifically?
Nope, sorry, I was just fixing my phone.
Thank you so much. All right, public comment. We'll open up to the public. Seeing no hands in our audience and none on the attendees list, we'll bring it back to the dais for motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce a resolution of intent to levy and collect annual assessments, preliminarily approve the engineer's report for fiscal year 2022-2023 for the City of Cloverdale Lighting and Landscape Assessment District, and setting the time and date of the public hearing for Zone 1 pursuant to the Lighting and Landscape Act of 1972.
There's a second from Councilmember Cruz. Roll call when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Lands. Councilmember Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Walter recused himself, and Mayor Lands.
Aye.
Resolution passes 4-0 with one recusal.
Vice Mayor, you back there? So for the Zone 2, I will have to recuse myself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michael, please let the records reflect that Mayor Lance has recused himself from the dais for this particular item. And once again, council members, we have a resolution for zone number 2, if anyone would like to make that resolution by title only.
And Vice Mayor, the way we handled the first resolution, which I recommend we handle this one, is open it up to the council to see if there's any specific questions about the resolution, then open it up to the public, the specific resolution, and then bringing it back to the council for any specific motions.
Thank you, Jose, for that recommendation. Council members, any questions on this particular item, zone number 2? Seeing no one, let me open it up to the public. Michael, do you have any hands out there?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Walter. We do not.
And I see no hands here at the Performing Arts Center. So would someone like to make the, read the resolution by title only?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'll go ahead and read the resolution by title only. A resolution of intent to levy and collect annual assessments, preliminarily approve the engineer's report for fiscal year 2022-23 for the City of Cloverdale Lighting and Landscape Assessment District, and setting the time and date of the public hearing for Zone 2 pursuant to the Lighting and Landscape, the Landscape and Lighting Act of 1972.
May we have a roll call, please? Seconded by Councilmember Cruz. I haven't done this in a while. Excuse me, please.
No problem. Thank you, Vice Mayor Walter. Councilmember Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Walter?
Aye.
Mayor Lance recused himself.
Okay. Let the records reflect that the motion has passed. Mayor Lance, if you could come back, please.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Moving on to Zone 3.
I will have to recuse myself. Thank you.
All right, let the record reflect. Councilmember Paula is recusing himself from Zone 3. Any questions from the council regarding Zone 3 specifically? Seeing none, could I have a motion?
Public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. No hands in the public, no hands in the audience. Bring it back to the dais. Go ahead.
I move that we pass this resolution by title only. A resolution of intent to levy and collect annual assessment preliminarily approve the engineer's report for fiscal year 2022-23 for the City of Cloverdale Landscaping and Lighting Assessment District, and setting the time and date of the public hearing for Zone 3 pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lance. Councilmember Paula recused himself. Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Walter?
Aye.
Mayor Lance?
Aye. Paula? Yes. Moving on to resolution for zones 4, 5, 6, and 7. Any comments specific to these zones from the council? Seeing none, open it for public. Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, bring it back to the dais. Open for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion by title only, City of Cloverdale City Council resolution, a resolution of intent to levy and collect annual assessments, preliminarily approve the engineer's report for fiscal years 2022 to 2023 for the City of Cloverdale Landscape and Lighting Assessment District, by setting the time and date of the public hearing for zones 4, 5, 6, and 7 pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972.
Have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lance. Councilmember Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Walter?
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Thank you for working through that one.
And Mayor, if I could just, for our city clerk, if you could please just note in the minutes, the council members recuse themselves because they live in those districts, just so we have that in the minutes.
Okay, G2, update and discussion of housing element goals and policies.
Mayor, council members, so we're going to have a progress report on the housing element, which we've been working on for a few months and has been before the Planning Commission a couple times. We are going to ask specific direction on what's called the draft housing strategy. With us tonight is Luke Lindenbosch from Four Leaf, and I think, Mike, could you bring Jane Riley in as a panelist? Jane, these are our consultants from Four Leaf, who are doing a great job working on our housing element for the last few months. They will point out where we're going to be looking for input, so we'll try to make it as clear as possible what we're seeking. The Planning Commission did have a pretty good discussion on the kind of the same areas on the draft housing strategy where we're asking for input as well. One of the big points that was made to the Planning Commission is we want to have some good policies about home ownership and be promoting home ownership in town as one of the goals and strategies, but I won't say any more and turn it over to Luke and Jane. All right, thanks, Luke.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Luke Lindenbusch. I am a housing policy planner with Four Leaf, joined by my colleague Jane Riley, our Director of Housing Policy with Four Leaf, and we are consultants for the fifth cycle housing element update. So as Kevin mentioned, we're going to be going into the draft housing strategy, a little bit of how we got to this point, and some feedback that we're requesting from the council this evening. Next slide, please. So we're going to be going a little bit over the community engagement update along with the sites assessment, which is a key component of the draft housing strategy and the housing element itself. Then going into the goals, policies, and programs, which form the bulk of the draft housing strategy. Direction on what's changed since the fifth cycle 8 years ago, and some direction that we're requesting from the City Council this evening. Next slide, please. So going into the community engagement update, next slide, please. This has mostly been formed by a community housing needs and opportunities survey, through which we've heard from around 100 residents of the city of Cloverdale. We've pushed this out in a number of different ways, which I'll get to in a second, but really what we're seeing from this survey is that there's a focus, as Kevin mentioned, on affordable housing, specifically home ownership opportunities, largely for younger residents, workers in the city of Cloverdale. So this has emerged as a clear priority. In terms of housing typologies that have been noted as being successful over the next 10 years in the city of Cloverdale, we saw over 60% support for accessory dwelling units and also for missing middle housing. So we saw really strong support for preservation of the neighborhoods, things that of families being able to live here, things that really people like about Cloverdale and want to see continued. So weren't surprised by that, but good to see strong support for different forms of housing that can be integrated throughout the community. In regard to stakeholder engagement, which we've been doing and which will be ongoing, we've been interviewing and surveying a number of stakeholders who are directly relevant to the process. This includes community benefit organizations that work both locally and regionally, and also interviewing housing development professionals, developers, but also people in allied professions, real estate agents, construction professionals, things along those lines to identify housing needs and constraints to development that'll help us write the document and do the research as to what needs to be continued and what needs to be changed this time around. In terms of community canvassing, we had our best success at the valiant return of the Cloverdale Citrus Fair. I was there all 4 days and had the opportunity to talk to hundreds of residents, got a bunch to take our survey as well. So this was a really good opportunity for us to really get the pulse of the community and get a sense of what people see as both the needs, the most pressing needs to Cloverdale, but also the opportunities that the city has to address the issue of housing. We also have conducted some door-to-door canvassing of neighborhoods. We've specifically prioritized the areas where there are higher proportions of renters, communities of color, lower income communities, to be able to be sure that we're fulfilling our statutory obligation to reach the communities that are in the greatest need of housing in our statutory obligations from the state in this update. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of the flyer that we have been passing out door to door and that we had at the Citrus Fair. Bilingual opportunity to take the survey. We had strong results in the survey in both English and Spanish, and that will continue. But this is just an example of the QR code that we have. We also, people can access it online, and at the Citrus Fair in particular, we had paper surveys available as well for people to take. So people who maybe didn't want to use their phone or take it at home online had an opportunity to do so there, and many took us up on that. Next slide, please. Now going into the preliminary sites assessment, this is one cornerstone of the housing element update, figuring out where those 273 units that the city of Cloverdale has to zone for are actually going to be zoned. So next slide, please. First off, looking at the regional housing needs allocation, or the RHNA, something I'm sure every member of the council is familiar with from prior presentations and general knowledge about the housing issue, but every jurisdiction has to identify sites where housing can be developed in the next 8 years. The jurisdiction is not obligated to build these units, but has to demonstrate capacity and a reasonable likelihood that these sites are going to be developed for housing. Sure thing.
We're on time constraint, but still is.
Thank you so much. I always need that reminder, and I appreciate it. Excellent. So the city of Cloverdale's RHNA allocation overall was 278 homes, but that doesn't just mean that the city has to zone for that many homes. They also have to zone and demonstrate reasonable likelihood that that capacity is going to be reached at a number of income levels, specifically very low, moderate, and above moderate incomes, with those figures reflected here. Next slide, please. So one way in which we're able to fulfill the RHNA obligations are by looking at the past track record of the city of Cloverdale in producing accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. You can see on the left column here that the city is averaging about 4 ADUs per year. So over the 8-year planning period, we can reasonably expect that the city is going to develop 32 ADUs. There was research that was conducted by the Association of Bay Area Governments to determine at what level ADUs generally develop out at in terms of income levels. So we broke down the categories based on those pre-approved figures, and those are reflected here in terms of 5 units, extremely low income, 5 very low income, 10 low income, 9 moderate income, and 3 above moderate income for the total of 32. So these are the zoning assumptions for ADUs that can be taken out of that 278 larger number of the city's RHNA. Next slide, please. So this site looks at the preliminary assessment of sites that are viable for development, and you can see right away that the city is in extremely good shape in terms of the sites. In addition to the ADUs and JADUs that can be assumed at 32 units, as you can see in the line above that on pipeline, developments that have been approved already or are very likely to be approved, that are in the application process, are reflected here, and the pipeline units alone are covering 579 units. So we're not concerned that the city is going to be able to meet its RHNA obligation in terms of units, and this is really, the majority of this can be covered through the pipeline. You can see there's a slight deficit in terms of extremely low income units as a result of this. Yes, there's a slight deficit in terms of extremely low units, but overall, the pipeline and ADUs are primarily taking care of the city's RHNA allocation. So we also see that vacant sites from the 5th cycle can be reused in this cycle. There's a stronger justification that has to be put in place for units that are developed in any other way. Even if it's a parking lot, it's considered non-vacant. So this is really absolutely vacant sites. And those ones are more eligible to be reused. Again, in really good shape from the pipeline and ADUs. But you also have this insurance policy really to be able to use some of those sites again and create a dynamic list over the 8-year period, and those can be added to the list through the annual progress report of the housing element. So with that, with all of those units possible, you're looking at 993 units, a 357% surplus of your sites. If you were to use all of them, we're not saying that all of them are going to be used, but really this is to demonstrate that through both recent sites that have been used in prior housing elements, annexations and such, and other pipeline developments, the city's in really good shape for meeting its RHNA obligation.
So Luke, I could just...
Sure.
So what's shown here is the arena that's being assigned to us, for the next cycle, and it has our pipeline projects, and maybe you already said this, Luke, but, just for example, some of the pipeline projects are, will they ever happen? Like the resort is in there and all the units there, and the Vista Oaks, which is going to be before you, but, we probably don't anticipate all of those projects coming to fruition. But these are really positive numbers for us because we're already demonstrating the next, 8-year arena that we have enough projects in the pipeline to meet that arena, with the exception, of course, of the extremely low. But anyway, I just wanted to make that clear that that's what you're looking at here, and it's a positive thing.
Absolutely.
Kevin, did you just say Alexander Valley Resort?
Correct. So the consultant asked us about all the projects that are at some point are in the pipeline, and that project is actually approved. Some of the other ones are in earlier stages of development, but it does include all the projects that are in the pipeline. And Luke, I don't know if you want to define the pipeline, but we gave them the projects that have interacted with us, some that are approved, or others that are being talked about.
So there is a developer?
No,
because I think that there's not even a possibility with that at this point.
Say again, I'm sorry.
So I didn't think that there was a developer.
No, there isn't. So
or a project that has been approved. So that couldn't even count towards our.
Well, again, this is what they call the pipeline. So it's really looking forward.
But it's not even real. That's not even real. I mean, that's an abstraction.
No, and that's a fair thing to say. It is an approved project. I mean, it could be built. The developer, a purchaser of that project could come in. I mean, we've had some interest in it. Now, granted, it's been around a long time, but this doesn't remove us from still identifying the sites that are going to accommodate our arena. It just shows that there are projects that could fulfill our arena. It's just an exercise in this process of the housing element to show what is in the pipeline, what's a possibility. We still have to accommodate and make sure that the correct zoning is in place to accommodate what is being assigned to us from ABAG. So I don't know if that's what you're asking. It doesn't relieve us.
It doesn't seem like something that should be even included.
How many homes are we
Jose,
talking?
can you explain that a little bit, please?
And actually, in these studies, you're looking at zoning a lot of the times as well, of property that could actually accommodate the type of housing and it's properly zoned, there's not really the assessment of, is this project actually going to happen? Because we may have a pipeline of projects that unfortunately may never happen, right? Developers come in, they get entitlements, they're almost ready to build, something happens with the economy, and they back out. But what we're required to do in our housing element and for these types of studies, and please add any information, but is really looking at your available sites, like the slide says, the preliminary assessment of viable housing sites for inventory. The site is still there. There's a DA that's been approved. There was zoning changes that were approved in that area. So the law just looks at it as saying, is it a viable site for this project? Now, we all know that sites turnover. I mean, there's sites, projects turnover, they change, they're modified. But right now, this assignment here that the law has us do is looking at what are our current sites, what are they zoned for, what type of projects are even scheduled, and what kind of pipeline is even a possibility there.
Okay.
But I absolutely get it, and that's always a confusion of what is actually built or will be built versus what sites are available, and that's different.
Yeah, because that's more of a site available than anything that's really happening. And then I have one question for you right now, because you said that sometimes insurance is a problem for, I couldn't follow what you were saying. I don't know if it was on the ADUs or if it was regarding the after credits.
So that was just speaking not literally about insurance, but just that the vacant sites and other pipeline projects, the fact that there's 3.5 times more than really what you need to zone for in this exercise, that's kind of your insurance policy. Like you have some backup plans if, for example, a project like Alexander Valley doesn't go through, or if any of your other pipeline projects don't go through. There's a number of different options that can be used to fulfill your arena over the 8-year cycle. So every year through the APR, the city is checking in to make sure that you don't dip below that 278 number at any time. So it's really a dynamic list where if a project goes south and it doesn't end up happening, you can put a different one in there. I also just want to take a little bit of a step back just to indicate kind of the significance of these numbers and why this is important, because really in the housing element process, the biggest penalty at this point is if cities do not have adequate sites and have to rezone. That's where cities are really running into difficulties with timelines, and there's new legislation that requires a rezoning within a year if you don't meet the statutory deadline of January 31st of next year. So really the fact that the city doesn't have to rezone is the main point here, that there's a number of options, and in terms of the rezoning or the zoning or the sites part of it, the city's in really good shape. So that's why we're confident about that.
So that definitely makes a difference when you say that we don't have to rezone.
Right.
So that's like a key element here.
Absolutely.
And Mayor, members of council, if I can, just to remind council that we did receive correspondence that was requesting the council to consider additional sites as part of our housing element process. And I think what Luke is pointing out based on these numbers is that legally to comply with the requirements of HCD, that we're in good shape. We don't necessarily need to take that action. I mean, council could opt to take that action, of course, it's within your discretion. But given our arena numbers, given what's in the pipeline, and given the analysis of vacant sites, we're in good shape. So we don't anticipate being necessary to designate additional sites for housing. And so again, I think that's a positive in terms of this process. So again, if given the interest from organizations to make that request, we can point to these numbers and say, we believe these are sufficient to meet our housing need, at least in terms of meeting the requirements of HCD in reviewing our housing element. I think that's fair to say, Luke.
So Mr. Mayor gave me some time. Even though you're including what is the number of the Alexander Valley Resort? What is the number of housing units that you're considering here?
140, isn't it?
I think it's around 100. I'd have to look it up.
Well, the thing is that that's such a far-fetched number that it's not within a reality, a reality that we within the next 5 years, let's say, unless we have somebody that really has the money and has the intentions to develop. That number, and I have to voice this publicly, I think that we do need to take seriously consideration of other areas for housing, because that is tied up to such a big property and such a big investment that is not likely to meet the needs that are upcoming in the near future. So, numbers that are not for real to say that we are okay are not necessarily a good. They are not for real, because Alexander Valley Resort would have 100 units that have been contemplated for the last 20 years, I understand. So, we need another 20 years, and we have a need for housing at this moment. I think we need to put things in perspective here.
One of the Alexander Valley is not going to be what we call an opportunity site. It won't be identified as a place that's going to meet our arena numbers. It's simply reflected here as a potential project that could happen. The arena numbers, across the bottom there, will be accommodated in other areas of town. And the Alexander Valley has never been one of the sites that would be identified to accommodate housing. It's just another opportunity to provide additional housing, if that makes sense.
For whatever it means, but to me, it just has no value.
Thank you. I just want to go back a little bit to what David was saying a bit about the rezoning, and that I think the fact that the city can rezone at any time is something that I think should be brought up. We're not saying that you can't rezone or that you shouldn't rezone. It's always better to rezone with the time that's required to be able to do the process on the community's terms than doing it in a really truncated timeline just because the state says you have to meet a zoning exercise. So that's the main point there. Next slide, please. So now going into the rest of the draft housing strategy, which is really the goals, policies, and programs. Next slide. So emphasizing that this is a housing element update, we were really lucky in Cloverdale to have a housing element that really was meeting the needs of the community in large part in the structure of the fifth cycle housing element. So in that mind, to that end, we retained the existing goals of the prior housing element, 6 goals, which we'll go through in a second. And we'll also just restate that the amount of sites minimizes the need for extensive programs, including rezoning, but also programs that would fulfill housing at every income level because there's a really demonstrated capacity there that is going to pass muster with HCD. In addition, when we went to the Planning Commission, we've been to the Planning Commission twice before the City Council, they indicated that they wanted us to really focus on the statutory requirements of the housing element and not go into non-unit objectives. But there were some elements of the prior housing element that are non-unit objectives that will continue in this plan. Highlighting 2 key differences in this draft housing strategy compared to the last housing element. Some programs have been eliminated just because they've already been done, so they're no longer relevant to this cycle, largely due to state requirements that were from the prior 8 years. And in some instances, for brevity and for making it easier on staff who are going through and indicating on the APR what's been done on all these programs over the course of the next 8 years. Some of these programs have been combined just to create some administrative ease in that regard. But for the most part, the fifth cycle is there, and it's mostly about looking at what can potentially further be eliminated or can be added from there. So that's the second difference, is the additional programs, which really is going to be driven by City Council recommendations tonight in our discussion. In addition, there's going to be a variety of code changes to reach compliance with state law that's been passed over the past 8 years and wasn't reflected in the past element. Among that is affirmatively furthering fair housing. So I'll just take a moment to note that. Assembly Bill 686 was passed a couple of years ago and enshrined in state law a federal program that looks at housing and looks at fair housing on a local basis for a really on an extensive basis for the first time. So it's incorporated within the housing element, and what we're seeing from jurisdictions in Southern California and Sacramento that have already completed this process, that it's the main thing that the Department of Housing and Community Development has comments on. And so there will be programs within the goal of fair housing that are going to be included as we conduct our affirmatively furthering fair housing analysis. So that'll probably be the biggest change that you see from the document presented here and the full draft housing element that'll be coming out early in the summer. Next slide, please. So going through the goals, the first goal, conserve and improve the existing housing stock to provide adequate, safe, and decent housing for all Cloverdale residents. The programs that are contained under this goal, and just to give you an indication of the structure of it, there's the broader goals, of which there are 6, then there are policies, and then there are implementing programs, which are specific actions that the city takes to carry out those goals and policies. So the first one has programs that are oriented around conservation of existing housing stock for the sake of safety of residents and can be expanded and currently covers this. The second goal, provide housing for all economic segments of the community. This is really focused on making sure that, this is looking a lot at development standards in the programs and making sure that affordable housing is pursued in city policy and programs. The third goal, really more specifically, drills down into the affordable housing part by saying expand affordable housing opportunities for persons with special housing needs. This is really making sure that the city is doing good on making sure that the statutory requirement to have housing for a variety of people with special housing needs, seniors, the disabled, are all being met through this document. Next slide, please. The fourth goal is what I mentioned earlier is the fair housing goal, promote housing opportunities for all persons regardless of various classes. This is, again, the one where we're probably going to be seeing more programs added, but this has to do in large part in the program side of things with fair housing complaints and the like. Goal number 5 is to ensure public participation in the development of the city's housing policies. This is really making sure that community engagement is at the forefront of everything the city does, and programs are reflected under that goal. Goal number 6 is the environmental one, to promote effective and efficient land use in meeting housing needs, including consideration of energy and natural resource conservation and green building technologies. This has to do with both renewable energy, also has to do with water, which is an area where from the survey results we'll probably be needing to focus on, as it was identified as a key constraint. We all know it's a key constraint. So that's a sense of the goals. We'll go through in our discussion areas where we can expand the programs here, areas where from your review you'll see that there may be areas that we can emphasize further or that can be adjusted accordingly. Next slide, please. So going a little bit into a sense again of what the community and the Planning Commission we're recommending, just to kind of tee up City Council recommendations to get a sense of where these land and where these can be pursued with you. As Kevin mentioned at the beginning, there was really strong support for a variety of housing types, primarily accessory dwelling units and home ownership opportunities. Going a bit into accessory dwelling units, the city already has fairly innovative policy that goes beyond state standards by allowing 2 ADUs per lot, two detached ADUs per lot. So that's beyond the state standard of 1. There was also support at the Planning Commission for a regional pre-approved plan program that would make it easier for residents to build an ADU. So basically, you can go straight to the building department.
Could you Luke, could you just slow down a little more and back up about the Planning Commission and to support what type of a program?
Yeah, so we took a number of proposals the step before the draft housing strategy to the Planning Commission, and the one that they were really most enthusiastic about was ADUs. So they said that they wanted the city to go farther in promoting the development of ADUs. This will help the city in its arena as well. If it is developing more than 4 ADUs a year, that can help with the numbers as well. So the regional program is being opted into by, it's conducted through the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. That's one that we brought up that the Planning Commission was interested in, which has pre-approved plans. So based on different design and development standards that are objective in accordance with state law, the city could adopt those and they'd be able to be built on a number of lots throughout the city. So that would be an opt-in program that would be able to be incorporated into the draft housing strategy. The city could look into a number of different things in terms of ADUs though. So really we're looking for council direction on this one, including different areas where there can be expansion beyond the state program or potential support for deed-restricted units, things like that.
Yeah, if I may, one of the interesting ideas that I kind of liked in the ADU discussion was we have the inclusionary housing ordinance where they either pay a fee or they commit a certain number of affordable units in a market rate subdivision. If they agree to do a certain number of ADUs in that subdivision, like we could negotiate that and negotiate with the fee. I don't know, it would be, so we could put something in the housing element that would be a general statement or goal to say, encourage the production of ADUs in lieu of the in lieu or something like that, so that we at least have a jumping off point if we want to investigate that on a subdivision. So I thought that was an interesting idea that had some support at the Planning Commission.
Absolutely. Moving into support for homeownership opportunities, one area that the commission was interested in, not full through support for it, but interested in exploring a land trust model for opportunities for homeownership for low and moderate buyers as well. There was also some emphasis from the Planning Commission and also just reflected in the community survey that it is important to expand ownership opportunities for low and moderate home buyers in Cloverdale, and specifically first-time home buyers as well. So there's a number of different policy interventions that the city could take on this, and again, looking for further direction from the City Council at this time.
Luke, will you explain the land trust model?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, with the land trust model, there is a deed restriction on the land that requires the home to be affordable for usually 99 years. And as a result of that deed restriction, it's less of an equity generating opportunity, which was one concern that the Planning Commission had, but it is an opportunity to lower the price of homes for sale, particularly single-family homes, especially considering most affordable housing is multifamily, so it's somewhat of a unique opportunity in that regard. And there are some examples in Cloverdale where the land trust model has been used, particularly on Iole Ranch. So if there's any further discussion the City Council wishes to have at this point, we can pause for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question. Some cities have implemented modular homes as a way for first-time home buyers where you actually buy the property, not where you lease the property, because when you lease the property, obviously it's quite expensive and it continues to go up. And have we looked at that? Has that been something that's been discussed? I know our city to the south has such a thing in place, and it seems to be working very well. The prices are somewhat low considering what the prices are in that city, and the modular homes are fairly nice, and they are buying the property. So it's like a home, but it's a modular home. So has that thing been discussed at all?
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly an option that can be explored. There's a number of different modular housing factories in the area that have emerged in recent years as well that have made it more of a viability for the Bay Area as a whole. So that's definitely something that can be pursued both in single-family, multifamily construction.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a concern about the mobile home parks. That's an area that there is absolutely no municipal jurisdiction. It has to go through the state. I myself have been working with our senator to try to come up with some way of maintaining the mobile home parks in Cloverdale. And we have not been very successful. There are conditions that are not appropriate, and we just don't know what to do. And it doesn't quite provide the adequate living conditions that some of the people need. So I see here to encourage preservation and maintenance of the 3 existing mobile parks, but I don't know, perhaps that's going to have to be an initiative by staff and support by council. What is your insight on this?
So there is a program under that first goal with the
again?
There is a program under that first goal for, as you mentioned, the conservation of mobile home parks. And one thing that's going to be worked into this housing element is really having clearer timelines that are established in terms of, what exactly is the outreach that's being done to these mobile home parks? How often is it being done to really align it better with the goal?
By whom?
I'm sorry, what was that?
By whom?
By
Our outreach as a city council and as a city?
By the city.
We really can't do that. We don't have jurisdiction over mobile parks. Could you guys discuss this some more?
I know there is a way with a big commitment by the city where the city can take over the jurisdiction of the mobile home parks. And I know that because when I worked in the city of Calistoga, they had that, and they're building.
What did that mean? What did that mean?
That means that the state, if there's a complaint, it went to the city. If you wanted a building permit or issues related to the park, it all went through the city. I know that their building inspector had to have certain special training. I think it's called Title 20. But there is a way to do that, but we have a very limited staff. And I understand that what you're saying, Councilmember Cruz, that when there's complaints, it goes to the state, and then you never hear from them, and there's one inspector for, you know, a large area, and it's hard to get anything done. And I believe that to be true. There is another way, which is, and I don't know the process, maybe Jose does, or we could research that on getting jurisdiction in terms of health and safety and building issues within the parks.
And Mayor, members of council, if I can, just to kind of focus in on the action tonight, is really to prepare and get your feedback on a draft housing strategy. So one of the strategies that you could provide direction on is to pursue this analysis about assuming the direct control of our mobile home parks within our community as a way to foster and support affordable housing. It would probably mean doing the necessary feasibility work to evaluate what it entails, what it means to address the regulatory environment and what are the requirements to do so. Also the staffing components of taking on that jurisdiction, what it means for council, what it means in terms of our water and sewer enterprise. But I think just again, keeping this at the high level that we're seeking your feedback tonight is, would you like us to put in a strategy that pursues this? So you wouldn't be making a decision tonight to say, yes, we want to assume control of our mobile home parks. You'd say, but you would like to, as part of a housing element strategy, have a strategy that says evaluate or consider the management structure for or permitting structure for our mobile home parks within our community as a way to preserve and support affordable housing. So just again, that might be an avenue that you might want to, as a council, provide us feedback on. And Luke, is that consistent with kind of the feedback that you're seeking tonight relative to
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the reason I emphasize this is because I've been trying this. This is my last year in council. I've been trying and working on this since I became aware of what the situation is, 3 years now. And this is the first I hear that we can have access to do something like this. And I had discussed with the staff my conversations with Senator McGuire and his office regarding this. And if it's going to be included in this particular situation for housing element, we need to be committed to do something about it, because otherwise it has to be out of the equation also. We have a situation in this town that has been going on for a long time in terms of mobile home parks. So we need to be committed to do something about it, or we need to continue to ignore it. So I think that tonight we need to make a decision on that.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, first of all, I'm not aware of the situation that you're referencing, so it's hard to put any judgment on how severe it is, because this is the first I've heard of it. I just want to be clear on my suggestion was to look at not mobile home parks, but to look at new sites that would actually be purchased by the person putting the modular home on it. So they would actually be a landowner with their own modular home. That's what I was referencing so I think we're talking two different things, but I'm not aware of the situation, so it's hard to weigh in on the severity. I was unaware of your conversations with the senator. I was unaware of how severe. So I think that may be a conversation on a code enforcement and a process that we need to look at, maybe put it on a subcommittee for further discussion. But again, at this level, it's hard to weigh in because we're just not in that loop at this stage.
Well, Councilmember Paula, we need to take a drive around Cloverdale mobile parks. We need to go deliver gifts to mobile parks in Christmas time and when it rains. And unfortunately, mobile parks are owned by corporations here in Cloverdale. There's 3 mobile parks. So unfortunately, people can buy the mobile unit, but they can buy the mobile unit, but the land belongs to somebody else.
Right.
So what you're saying, yes, it's a different thing, and it's a very viable and it's a very good suggestion. I don't think you were in council when I started, when you came back to council when I started these conversations. But it's definitely something that we need to converse about. I do believe that it has to go to some subcommittees. And I think we need to continue the conversation with the senator's office, and we need to give some guidance to staff about this. So, but definitely, it's a serious aspect because we have 3, and the majority of the people who reside in these mobile parks are Latino people, are farm workers who need attention, and we cannot continue to let this go on the sideway. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councilmember Cruz. I guess one of the things that I've always been, I don't want to say upset about, but I haven't been too happy with is the in lieu fees, where we give a developer the opportunity to either pay into our low to moderate income housing fund or to build actual sticks and bricks. And I think as long as we give them the opportunity to write a check out, we're taking away the possibility of home ownership for someone. I'd like to see us change that if we can. I'm not sure if it's on the state level or not, but I'd like to see a developer actually have to build a unit that's going to be sold to somebody to live there, as opposed to writing a check out. Because then we just gather this money, and for us to go out and buy land and hire a developer to build houses, it doesn't get done. So that would be number one. Number two, just backing up what Councilmember Cruz had said, at one point in time I had the opportunity to speak with, and I'm not going to give a name, but speak to some higher officials about McCray Road and the septic problem that we have that goes along the Russian River there. And, when I was first on the council, I wanted to see us go out there and start red tagging some of these septic systems because they weren't up to code. And it never materialized because those families would be displaced. And when you start doing something like that, like going into the motorhome parks and start demanding that things get done, it's nice to have a little backup, because that individual can actually shut that park down, that corporation, and displace quite a few people. But, I guess just taking away and giving staff some direction, I'd like to see us explore the possibility of making our in lieu fees a little more stricter and just have them have to build homes. I don't know, Jose, if that's something we can do or if that's on a state level.
And that is actually one of your ordinances, is the one that requires the in lieu fee and sets the in lieu fee. We could definitely bring that back as one of the things to look at and what the options are, whether it's, and I think what I hear you saying is kind of the option of in lieu fee, limiting that and making them build the actual affordable housing.
Yeah, I think that's the way we're going to encourage home ownership. So.
Yeah, to tell on Jose's, our city attorney's comments, the inclusionary housing ordinance is part of your zoning ordinance. It's really separate from the housing element, though I think what, Vice Mayor, if I hear what you're saying is you want strategies to require developers that are building or developing market rate housing to build the inclusionary units on site.
Exactly.
And I think that's good feedback for the housing element, because we can reflect a policy that encourages, that the city will encourage developers to provide inclusionary units on their site rather than opt to an in lieu fee. And so I think that's good feedback that we can reflect in the housing element. And then we can look at the inclusionary requirements kind of separately, and you can determine as a council, whether you want to modify that and strengthen it in any way. One way to do it is increase the fee, the inclusionary fee, that, often developers will opt out. But, again, that's kind of a separate discussion, I think. But giving us the feedback that you'd like to see a policy related to that, we can certainly take that feedback and reflect that in the housing element itself.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bagby, I can't see you on our screen, so I apologize. So if you're there, please go ahead.
A couple of questions for Luke and Jane and some comments. I don't know how deep a dive they did into our existing housing stock, but I just wanted to remind the council and the community and our consultants as well that, a really great example of mixed use and different kinds of housing already exists in Cloverdale at Sunrise Hills. It's a beautiful subdivision, and it has a mixture of single family homes with I think it has both attached and detached ADUs, as well as, townhomes. And I think that that's a really great model for us to just work from, is that we already have a really great, successful housing project. Of course, most of our housing stock is still pre 2008 housing crash, but it's just a reminder that, yeah, we've got a great local example in Cloverdale of something that, for different income levels and different kinds of people, where they are, something for the kind of housing where you are in your life. When you're single or you're newly married, you probably want an apartment. When you start having kids, you want a bigger house. And then when you get older, people, not everybody, but a lot of people want to downsize. So, it's that mixture of inventory and the availability of the inventory that contributes, I think, a lot to our, our real, lack of like a zero, with a real vacancy rate that's just practically at zero. And then also, I just kind of wanted to call out, I was really happy to see the mention of the pre-made ADU designs. It's, to my knowledge, I think Santa Rosa went ahead and already adopted that, and that's pre-designed and pre-approved ADUs that anybody can build on their existing property. And I think the city of Santa Rosa has adopted that, and maybe Luke or Jane would know of other municipalities in Sonoma County. And I think that that's kind of something that started happening around 2020, and we were a little busy with other things. Maybe we weren't as aware. We aren't maybe as aware of how widely that may or may not have been adopted. And then as far as the questions about, the mobile home parks, I tend to agree that in the short term, that's a code enforcement issue that I'm sure we need to look at. But just a reminder that it's a reminder of how much substandard housing we have and how we do need to support, affordable housing projects, because that will help alleviate, some of the pressure. And then long term, I would be happy to examine the issue about, local control of existing mobile home parks. I'd be happy to take that on at planning and sustainability, just to sort of do the initial research and legwork of, what it would take, what it would cost, what the scope would be. It's definitely something that we should probably be at least researching at this point. So that's probably my questions for Luke and Jane. But I think it's a great report. It's a great examination, and the Planning Commission did a great job of doing some of that initial legwork for us. So we appreciate their contribution to this so far. But I'd be interested in hearing, what the public has to say about where we are in the project and where we are in the process.
Thank you, Councilmember Bagby. I only have a couple quick questions and comments. The first one is, I really like the approved plans as well, the pre-approved plans for the ADUs. I know it's kind of self-serving, but I'm a contractor, and it would make life a lot easier and a lot cheaper for the community, and a lot easier through our planning process. So I love that idea. is it normal for a city in this process, in the arena, to have half your arena needed in the above moderate income category?
Yes.
I had no idea, and I mean, I love it and support it, but, you know, everyone always focuses on affordable or a certain, you know, area, the demographic or whatever, but I was like, that's kind of surprising to see it so high. It was literally like 50% or more, actually, on our charts. So maybe one thing I would like to look into is recruiting something to bring that tax base in as well as the affordables for our housing element. And the other thing I would like to look at is, I've heard in the Planning Commission meetings and in our own, a lot of the first-time home buyers, the younger, it's more of a moderate income or low income, that they don't have access to these places because they don't meet a certain demographic or job opportunity. And so we need to focus on that a little bit more too, in my opinion. Just for instance, so you know, a friend of ours that always comes in here and talks loudly, her daughter can't get housing anywhere and sleeps on a couch. But she works at a local business, so that's what I'm focusing on, is people in that range. Come home from college, need help to get started. Any other people here? We're open to public.
There are a handful more slides. I'm just going kind of through the next steps of the process. No, this is just a pause moment, not really to go into those specific points, but I'll indicate sort of the rest of the process, where we're at now, and what's next, and then had a couple of discussion questions as well, if there's anything additional you wanted to dive into from that too. So we'll get there in a moment. But just first and foremost, this again, the draft housing strategy is the last time we'll be going to the City Council before the publication of the housing element document in its entirety. And then it will come back to the City Council after there's been a handful of different periods of review. It'll go to HCD, it'll come back, it'll be publicly released at both times with 30-day review and then with a 90-day review. And then after that process has been undergone, and then after the CEQA environmental review has been conducted as well, it'll come back to the Planning Commission and to the City Council for final approval. And again, public input is going to be part of every step of that. So just wanted to give you that sense of what the rest of the summer and the rest of the year is going to be looking like. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, a lot of this was covered, but really just some areas for the City Council to consider if there are any last thoughts on this. Areas where the goals, policies, and programs can specifically be expanded is a lot of what we're looking for. Areas where there might be programs that can either be eliminated due to redundancy or potentially deprioritized, largely in consideration of resource allocation. We know Cloverdale is a small city, so there's only a finite amount of resources to be used. So a lot of this is about figuring out really what the highest priorities are for funding for the city as well. Additionally, how can we best continue to hear from Cloverdale residents? Which fair housing issues present the most pressing need, as we are sort of on the front end of conducting that analysis, and will be factored more into the document as we go. How can the city achieve compliance with state mandates while best serving Cloverdale's unique community needs? We already got a lot into that as well. And then finally, just what is your vision for meeting Cloverdale's housing needs and opportunities in the next 8 years? So a lot of good comments so far. Hopefully those questions can help sort of inspire any sort of final, anything that might come from the council as well, if there is any.
Any other comments on these last slides?
Well, if I may, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only comment I want to make is state mandates and the state's unwillingness to really put in the infrastructure when you're mandated to put in the housing units or allow the housing units to go in, and not having adequate infrastructure to service them. Things like sidewalks, bike lanes, proper lighting. So we just went through that exercise with a project on Asti Road that doesn't have any of the infrastructure in place, nor did the state provide any funding to make that happen. So this community is going to have to suffer trying to figure out how to fund it. It needs to happen, clearly, for safety purposes, but how we're going to pay for it is something we got to figure out. So those kinds of things are very important to cities that are, that are on limited finances to be able to accommodate these projects if the funding's not there to complete all the steps with the infrastructure. So I don't know if that can be addressed in these plans as we look at the zoning and how that fits, but somehow we got to figure out how it connects to the town, the project. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just that, as Councilmember Walter said, we need to have a backup plan in the event that we encounter issues with some of the housing units that are not necessarily up to code. And we don't want to, by doing this, we have the best intentions. We don't want to displace anybody. And many times that's the catch-22. But given the fact that these mobile homes, which is my pet peeve, have specific owners, there should be a way for us as council and as municipal staff to work in conjunction with the state and the senator to come to some agreement on how can we work with these groups of owners to comply with city objectives and standards. So, that would be an appropriate solution without necessarily cutting the housing units available. But it is one of those gray areas that definitely impacts the community and that we are mandated to address because it is our constituents. So thank you for this effort, and definitely believe that somehow we need to encourage the prefab units, especially because now they look so nice and they're really affordable. And we as a council need to make sure that we give guidance to staff to make sure there is enforcement on those units that we have in town that are truly substandard and are impacting many of our constituents. Something that really has to be addressed. It's sad to see people living without appropriate infrastructure, without appropriate ventilation, and paying excessive amount of money. So we need to get our housing units so that these people don't have to live in such conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bagby, anything further?
No, not right now.
Thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Same. I will open up to the public. Anyone in the audience? Yes, sir, please come forward.
Good evening to you. My name is John Moak at the Cottages, and I'd like to congratulate you. It's a nice report. It seems comprehensive. The one item that I was looking for and that was not addressed, unless I missed it, and then I'm sorry about that, but I don't think it was in there, is that a discussion about additional units and living conditions and living spaces for people in Cloverdale. Obviously, we're all aware of the water situation in California. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. As the water supply and the water situation in this area being taken into consideration when you start talking about new developments in the Cloverdale area. We are, I think, almost at the limit. I do not mind having a conversation about additional units built and expanding the footprint of Cloverdale, but you definitely need to have a conversation about, is there enough water to supply? And I haven't seen it, so that's my comment. And if it's not in there, then do you have a plan of addressing that?
Thank Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That is a great comment. David, do you want to discuss, or Kevin either, want to discuss the state mandates for us right now with things like that?
Well, maybe some, just to touch on it is that, tonight is that the focus is the housing element. As your community development director provided for in the agenda report, there are, I think it's 7 other elements of our general plan. One of which is your conservation element. So there is a whole set of other policies that relate to, I think, the issue that Mr. Mook has brought forward about water and water conservation. And of course, the council does have a whole set of laws on the book in your Muni Code that provide for, setting and declaring water shortage emergencies and responding to, of course, state requirements and orders that are above and beyond our own local control. So a lot of that does obviously reflect how you look at and evaluate housing developments, and those all come into play when we bring those projects forward for review and as part of that conversation. So again, this element tonight, the discussion tonight, I don't want to lose sight of Mr. Mook's comments, because I think they're very vital and important to have. But they're kind of what I guess I'm saying is that they are addressed in other areas of your general plan and in your municipal code. So I know they are very front of mind for council, and we will be bringing a discussion forward on the water shortage emergency, drought conditions, and how that impacts our residents.
Right. And with this is based around the RENA, which is kind of a state mandate here. So that's also something that we have to keep in mind. We don't always have control over what the state mandates us to do, even though we are short on water.
Right. This is really what we're doing tonight is we're planning. We're talking about how we are going to address planning requirements for housing, and again, those other policies in your general plan that guide kind of the issue around water and other resources, of course.
I was going to say, Mayor Lance, we have another attendee with their hand up.
Please bring them in.
Please state your name. Hello, everyone. My name is Cal Weeks. I'm the policy director with Generation Housing. I just wanted to briefly comment on the actual comment made by the last speaker. There's actually a fair amount of evidence, both locally and statewide, that would suggest that multifamily housing is actually, generally speaking, or it has typically a nominal effect on the overall water supply. Generally speaking, the biggest issue that we have is actually these single family home subdivisions. Those are what is really killing us at this point. And so that's just to add further context to that conversation. What I really wanted to comment on was I appreciate Councilmember Paya bringing up the fact that we need to kind of take a closer look at in lieu fees. Obviously, it's a complicated subject. There's a lot of factors and variables you have to take into consideration. I mean, there are some major advantages, of in lieu fees. I mean, they increase the flexibility for developers, particularly for smaller developments. But they also could, lead to construction activity that, reinforces, our existing patterns of segregation. There's a lot of other advantages, disadvantages. I won't dive into that right now. I'm more than happy to talk with you offline. But one of the other things I would just briefly add to, further kind of elucidate what I'm trying to touch upon here is there are some challenges, especially when you're trying to set the fee. I may not be providing, earth-shattering information here. But one of the things that is kind of challenging when it comes to a smaller community is trying to gauge whether or not you want to set the in lieu fee at a lower level, which then would obviously incentivize them to go potentially elsewhere or put the units elsewhere, or at a higher level, which would obviously force their hand and probably result in the mixed use development being built. But I have seen in other jurisdictions that this can sometimes be an inhibiting factor actually to those units being developed at all. So my point being is this is something we really need to take seriously. And again, I'm glad Councilmember Paya raised this.
And I'd be delighted to either have that conversation with you myself, or I'm sure Jane, with her many years of experience, would be delighted as well to further expand on that. And with that, I will end my comment, and thank you very much for your time and service.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
And Mr. Mayor, no one else is raising their hand at this time.
Thank you very much. No one else in the audience, so we'll bring it back to the dais. Any further comments? Councilmember Bagby, I don't see you on our screen anymore. Can you look into the panelists and see if she's... There she is.
Oh, yeah, I'm here. I just keep getting bounced off the Wi-Fi.
Any further comments, Councilmember?
No.
Okay,
Thanks so much. So with this, have we given enough direction?
Yep.
Yes, I've made some notes, and we'll go over those with the consultant, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on. G3, establishment of a, oh, actually, Luke, thank you so much. I apologize for that.
And I just want to note, thank you, Jane.
G3, establishment of a pickleball court project at Ferber Park.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We're excited to bring this item forward. It's been an item that we've discussed at the Public Works Subcommittee for a number of months now. And what we brought forward tonight really is a comprehensive request by council to take action to move forward with a pickleball project at Ferber Park. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Kevin Thompson, and also I know our Parks Superintendent Hector Galvan. Both of them have been dedicating time and effort to bringing this project to this point, and what you see in the agenda report is a reflection of that. And so Kevin's going to cover kind of the details of the requested action this evening.
Thanks, David. So Mayor and council members, we do have a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a minor construction agreement with Anderson Excavating for the construction of 2 pickleball courts, at Ferber Park. This has been discussed at the subcommittee about 3 times and was brought forward by Mr. Brad Horrell, who's here tonight, and he's a local pickleball advocate, and he knows a lot about the sport, and he's been really very helpful in us deciding certain things about how this would move forward. So the total budget is $153,600. That does include a very healthy contingency of 20%. The project really consists of 3 separate components, which is the asphalt component, which is around $75,000, and that's what we're asking for the resolution tonight. The second is the striping and netting, which is around $18,000. And then the fencing, which is somewhere between $13,000 and $18,000. The striping and netting and fencing are all within the city manager's signing authority. So what we're looking for tonight is the resolution to move forward with Anderson Excavating. It's being proposed to be paid through park and recreation development impact fees, and we can talk more about that if you'd like. Another action that we are seeking tonight is direction to amend the CIP. The CIP needs to be adopted every year. This was not included in the CIP, so when we bring forward the CIP for readoption around budget time, with council's direction, you'll see a new sheet in there indicating the pickleball court as a project, and I believe we have another project as well, and that will be around budget time.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'm going to try to make the tail end of the legislative reception here that I'm missing. So I think that the pickleball is in good hands, and so I am going to leave the meeting if that's all right with everybody.
Thank you, Councilmember Badger. Have an enjoyable evening.
And a preemptive congratulations. This is an exciting project. I can't wait to go out and play. So, all right, we'll see you guys at the next meeting. Thank you.
7:58.
So just to conclude my report, we're recommending adoption of the resolution that would allow the city manager to execute the minor construction agreement and get the ball rolling on the pickleball courts. Oh, just one real quick. Hector has been very instrumental, as David said. He had a good location picked out at Ferber Park where it's existing kind of a sand area that really no one uses except the cats, and he knew that right away, and it's shaded, and it's it's near the path, so it's a really great spot, and Hector's done a lot of great hard work on this project.
Thank you, Kevin. Who wants to comment first? Councilmember Cruz?
I can't believe how quickly this was moved and is going to be approved, and the amount of money that was not set aside in any kind of project and that we're going to be spending. You know, dog park people are going to be quite upset when they see how long they've been working on that and it hasn't happened, and this is going to happen, and look how much it's going to cost. Anyway, my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just want to say we've spent several meetings, several months working on this, and I want to thank Brad Horrell, who gave an excellent presentation to our subcommittee. We did have a field trip out there, the subcommittee, to look at the site, and Hector and his team did a fantastic job of walking through, and it's going to make it a nice asset for the community. Currently, we do not have any pickleball courts. We feel, thank the city finance as well as our city management team for looking at the different impact fees and set-aside funds that we have that are restricted funds for these types of projects. And to provide an activity for this community, as we just mentioned, we just adopted a proclamation honoring our seniors. And as Brad's going, I'm sure will speak, the bulk of the pickleball players are seniors who are active tennis players who now can't play tennis. So they have to leave our city to play pickleball, which is unfortunate as we try to build our city and provide activities and sites as we did with the senior center. Pickleball is just another natural activity for our seniors to be able to play. So, you know, I really am thankful that we could move this forward, that we did identify funding that's available, and we could make something happen quickly. And this is important, so thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I just want to thank Hector for his hard work in taking more or less the lead on this, along with city staff, to get this accomplished. I think it's long overdue, and I'd also like to give special thanks to Councilmember Paula, who really pushed this project forward. So I'm excited to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll open up to the public at this point. I don't see any hands here. I do one in the audience.
Mr. Mayor, this is Hector Cloverdale Park Superintendent. I just wondered if I can make a couple comments.
Give me 1 second, Hector. We have a public comment real quick, and then I'll let you go right after, if you don't mind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Brad Horrell, live in the cottages. I too would like to thank everyone for all the work that's gone in on this. It's been a challenge, but it's been fun at the same time. I also want to emphasize that pickleball is not just for seniors. It's for people of all ages. In fact, City of Santa Rosa is holding a clinic this evening for middle school kids, filling all 16 courts they have down there at Finley Park. So it's a great sport for everybody. We've been playing temporarily at Vintage Meadows Park, setting up our own nets. And a day doesn't go by that people don't stop and say, is this pickleball and can we play? And we're very welcoming. Anybody's welcome to come join us. So we're really looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Hector, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take a second to thank Brad Horrell. He was very helpful on providing a lot of contractor names and information, and it really made the process. This made the process a lot easier. So I just want to thank him for that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Seeing no other comments in the public, I'll bring it back to the dais.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce by title only resolution, adopt a resolution approving a fiscal year 2022-23 budget allocation in the amount of $75,845, which includes a 10% contingency, and authorize the city manager to sign a minor construction contract in a form acceptable to the city attorney and with Anderson excavating for the construction of 2 pickleball courts at Ferber Park, and direct staff to include the project in the revised capital improvement plan.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Cruz has a comment before we go to the vote.
As the gentleman, I don't see him, mentioned earlier. Oh, here you are. I was looking for Mary. Anyway, as he mentioned, this is not just for elders. And I would like to see in this particular resolution an outreach effort for young adults and for the Spanish-speaking community to play pickleball. And if they have clinics to do this for junior high students in Santa Rosa, perhaps that we have some clinics going on in Cloverdale and work with La Familia Sana, who promotes healthy activities for all family members, and with Nuestra Comunidad, who is the leader in community outreach for exercising with Zumba, so that they can be collaborators with this particular new venture in town. So I would like to see that added to this resolution, that there will be an outreach to some nonprofit organizations in town, particularly those addressing Latinx community, to encourage inclusion and participation with this particular project.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, first of all, I don't feel it needs to be part of this resolution. Certainly, it's an excellent point. At the budget session, just for Councilmember Cruz, you were not able to make that, but the city, we approved, and it'll come back for final approval, where our Hector, our superintendent of parks, is going to actually be spearheading recreation programs, working in partnership now, and there is funding set aside for that, and that's an excellent point you brought up, where he will be able to do outreach to do exactly what you're suggesting. And that is going to be, that's in the works as we speak, and maybe Hector, you can comment on that if you don't mind before we take the vote.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, many things have not been written in the past, and I think it's time that we start putting in writing in this bilingual county of Sonoma that some outreach is done to the Latinx community.
Vice Mayor, anything else?
No, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Right.
Requesting the vote.
Okay, well, now that we've brought it here, I'm going to open it up to the public as well. So, sir, please do come forward.
I thought it was open already.
It was, but then we reopened it with her
I
comment.
didn't know
so,
discussion
Okay.
of the motion is what it was. I think I called for the vote.
Anyway, I just wanted to address council member Cruz's concerns. With some other things that are going on.
Sir, actually, yes, because we have more discussion, I would like you to come forward.
My name is Patrick Houston. I live in Clover Springs. I'm a pickleball player and a good friend of Brad's. One of the other things that is part and parcel of this effort to get the pickleball courts built is also to create a pickleball club or an association here in Cloverdale. Brad's been very instrumental in creating a tennis association, which has done a lot of great work over the years. And one of the mission of the club will be to make this as inclusive as possible, and the sport as inclusive as possible, to promote it, and also to promote it across different age groups and communities. One of the really great things about pickleball is that it's a very inclusive sport. It is a low cost of entry. Men and women can play are equal on the court. So it's growing like crazy. So I just wanted to say that we're in the process of forming this association, and that will become an instrument by which we can make outreach to other people and communities throughout the Cloverdale. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If I may ask you, you said low cost?
Yes. Well, you need a paddle, and the balls are cheap. So it's not, and most people play on public courts. You know, it's not like you have to be like a golf course, as an example, where you have to pay exorbitant fees to get into the sport, or it's individual.
We're using public money for an activity and a court, and I would like to see the city pay perhaps for some of these clinics, because if we're going to be using public money to build a court that is going to be limited to people paying a particular cost to be part of it, I mean, where do we reconcile that?
Well, that's exactly what Hector is creating with the
Well,
recreation.
I would like to see that is written into the wording of this, because I refuse to pay for something with public money that is going to limit public participation.
It's not limited.
I'm just going to ask you a question. Do we hold basketball clinics through the public?
I don't know.
Do we have, or soccer clinics?
Well, see, these are things that have to be
So,
discussed.
Mr. Mayor, this isn't really one item. You have a motion out there. It's been seconded. I
Yeah,
call
but-
for the vote.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really have a concern about this. I mean,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call
it
for
is
the
not,
vote, please.
it is not the same, as basketball or baseball, because those are really known sports. This one is not. May I ask Mr. City Attorney, did you have a comment?
Is it going to affect this right here, or is it just a
I don't know. It's for me to decide if I'm going to vote for it or not.
Just provide a recommendation.
Okay. Please, go ahead.
Just recommending that as far as in writing, it be placed in the minutes as far as the concerns. And I know we will be discussing recreation, given the budget item. And at that time, if it's written in the minutes, that's something that the council is comfortable bringing up these specific comments when we're talking about recreation and the program for outreach that the council has set aside funds for. But if we could please place it in the minutes.
That sounds good to me, and that's all I needed to hear. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you, please.
Councilmember Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wolter?
Aye.
Mayor Lance?
Aye.
Councilmember Bagby is absent.
Moving into subcommittee items and reports, finance, admin, and police.
Mr. Mayor, we have not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is the first Monday of the month.
Thank you. Planning and sustainability.
That's going to be according to the schedule.
Public works.
We have not met since our last meeting. Next meeting is going to be the fourth Tuesday of each month.
Joint city and fire.
Mayor, the next meeting is June 13th.
And city school is the third bi-monthly at 4:30. I don't know if we have a date set.
It's May 16th.
It's May
Thank you.
16th.
4:30.
Thank you, sir. And the homelessness is, that's not on there either.
June 14th.
June 14th.
Or is it 1:30?
I think the next one is the 5 PM.
We didn't have the 1:30. That's why I didn't know if we carried it over.
Did we?
Well, we
Oh, no, we
canceled-
just
we-
canceled it,
yeah.
so I guess we could carry, what do you guys want to do on that?
I'd
Let's
like
set
to
now.
carry it over.
You want to carry it over for 1:30?
Yeah.
Perfect, and the next one will be at 1:30. All right, any council reports that's not already written? Okay, informational reports, seeing none. Legislative reports, letters of support, seeing none.
Mayor, real quick on that item, just wanted to follow up on an item that we received from the support group for Health Action. They are asking for a letter of support that would request the Board of Supervisors to establish funding. There's a couple of options here. It can can get, if council supports it, we could put it on our letterhead and prepare it for the mayor's signature. Or if you're more inclined, leave it up to each council member to decide whether they support a letter to the Health Action Group to request funding from the County Board of Supervisors. I have a draft letter that was distributed. Happy to send it, provide it to each of you if you'd like to take a look at it.
I would like to, I haven't seen it yet, so.
I'd like to see it.
The letter reflects that Health Action is revamping, kind of calling it Health Action 2.0. It was, the organization was really funded as a, under the county umbrella. They've now decided to kind of move more to a kind of a nonprofit model where they engage in more of a public-private partnership. And what they are asking for is funding support from the County Board of Supervisors to help the organization be more sustainable. And what they've asked is for individual council or the council as a whole to submit a letter of support for that. So each of you may want to consider independently, in which case it comes on your own personal letterhead, or whether you'd like to have this come on behalf of the city council, at which point we'd put it on city letterhead. And there's no specific timeline, so if you prefer, we can bring this back, or alternatively, just let me know your perspective, and again, you can, as an individual council member, write your own letter.
Well, I don't want to start talking about this. If you need further direction, fine, but I'm concerned about duplication of efforts. What other programs do we have in Cloverdale and in the county that provide the same services that we're going to fund through this letter writing campaign? So that would be my only concern.
City manager report?
No further reports, Mayor.
City attorney?
Nothing tonight.
Status update on current impacts to water?
Mayor, members of council, staff is currently evaluating the ongoing development of state regulations that are going to provide for a voluntary process. They're now calling it forbearance, that will provide kind of an off-ramp to the curtailment order. We are planning to bring that forward very soon, if not your next meeting in May, probably very early in June, to discuss whether council would like to participate in this voluntary process. I want to refer you back to previous agendas where we've provided updates via memo to council on that. The kind of the message is that we, despite the rains, we haven't seen the reservoir levels, fully recover from the impacts of drought, and we're continuing to message to residents to continue to do their part to conserve water, and be mindful that we are going to be likely continued drought conditions throughout the summer and early fall.
Thank you. Status on the current emergency of COVID-19?
No reports, Mayor.
Thank you. Direction on future agenda items. Does anyone have anything? I would like to see a date set for our retreat and get that on the books, on the schedule. Sooner rather than later.
And I would suggest that you do send alternate dates out so we can try to get all of us there.
Yes, sir.
So we can select one that works for everybody.
Absolutely. Nothing else? Great. This meeting is adjourned at 8:18.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you to your first meeting down there.